some work. I sent the agenda out ahead of time as well as the meeting minutes, and just want to review the agenda briefly before opening up for public comment on anything that's not on the agenda. So we're going to do the mission review as we always do, the most important part of why we meet, and consider the approval of the meeting minutes, followed by a brief overview of the upcoming training that we have scheduled, the implicit bias training. And then we're going to look at the areas of focus that we've been spending time on. So again, by using the transformational roadmap, we're really trying to zero in on some areas of focus that we can start making some progress in, and in order, I guess you would say, of the most important that we see. So those areas are focused on the topic of hiring, community partnerships, policy and procedures, and data. And then we are going to open the floor for public comment and then adjourn. I also know that we've been doing a lot of hard work and have talked about length of meeting time. So we'll touch on that at the end as far as when the next meeting will be and what that's going to look like. So starting with the agenda, is there anything that anybody sees, board members, that you would like to touch on not related to agenda items? And I can't see everyone, so you could either use that raise hand function or unmute yourself. And if nobody has any comments, then we're going to open it to the public for brief comment. Okay, so it sounds like I'm not hearing anything, so we're good with the agenda, and we'll move on to the next piece, which is the mission review. So the mission of the Police Advisory Board is to offer advice to the St. Albans Police Department for the successful implementation of 21st century policing strategies, and to assist the police department in following the established roadmap as amended by the City Council. So upon reviewing our mission, the next item up on the agenda is to consider approval of the meeting minutes. Did everybody get those in your email and have an opportunity to review? And are there any additions, deletions, modifications? If yes, if you could unmute and let me know. Otherwise, if somebody would possibly be open to making a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Tom. So I've got a motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jamie. All in favor? Say aye, thumbs up. Any opposed? Okay, so the meeting minutes pass. So the next piece that I just wanted to touch on, I think this is super exciting for our board. We have set up a training. It's an implicit bias training. And the trainer that we have, her name is Nikki Fuller, and I'm just going to pull up her bio. I have had the blessing of connecting with Nikki multiple times about this training, and we are scheduled to have that on Friday, April 23rd. And Nikki is she's a phenomenal person with her energy. Her energy is infectious. And she's also got a fantastic history with doing these trainings for a slew of various organizations. One of the biggest things that drew me to her, aside from the fact that she was highly recommended from a number of organizations across the state of Vermont that I partner with in my job working for Phoenix House, but also the fact that she is in Vermont, that we don't need to outsource valuable trainings. We've got somebody as valuable as her right here in the state. So she's got a number of various trainings that she offers. So, and I know we're going to be hanging on to her number, but the first one we're focusing on is the implicit bias training. So our board of directors is going to be meeting on Friday, as I said, April 23rd, for that training. It's a 2-hour training. It's definitely the type of training for anybody who's never taking any kind of bias training. It's a training that you can take more than once in a lifetime, that's for sure. So I just wanted to touch on that. I think it's a great opportunity for our board. I also think for us to get to know each other better, because this is still a fairly new board, and we haven't had an opportunity to connect a ton. I see Chris is coming in, great. So just wanted to touch on that we're going to be having that training the end of this month. There's other trainings we're going to be looking at for future, but again, just super excited to have Nikki Fuller be willing to do this training for our board. Any ideas or comments from our board members? Any feelings on this training coming up? Welcome, Chris.
Linda, I just had a quick question. I think, she sounds pretty amazing, and I'm super excited that we were able to capture her, to have her come do this training for us. But my question really is around what other organizations has she worked with locally? Has she worked with any in Franklin County before, or will this be her first?
So that's a good question. I'm not sure if she specifically worked in Franklin County, but she was referred to me by the south end of the state. She's done a lot of trainings for Rutland, for their medical employees, for their people in substance use and treatment and prevention, for the local hospital, for the police department, I'm not sure if you are all familiar with Project Vision, which is in Rutland, but she's done trainings for they've got various committees that have been meeting. So she's done trainings for, and it mentions too, for her experience working with businesses, schools, government agencies, law enforcement, hospitals, healthcare agencies, and nonprofit organizations. So I haven't gotten, I haven't asked her specifically where she's done trainings in Franklin County, Grand Isle County, if she has, and where. But the individuals that I connected with from Rutland, I was invited through my other job to one of their Project Vision meetings, one of their committees, and they couldn't say enough good about her. And when she does these trainings, she does them separately. So it's not, we're familiar with something called like Team 2 training, where law enforcement and partner organizations get the same training in the same room. But the training that she does it specifically for each organization. So I had asked her, would it be wise for us to invite more people to the training, to have more than 7 people at the training? And she said that it's most effective to have each group have their own training. So I don't know. I know that doesn't really answer a lot of, as far as where she's done training in Franklin County. I just don't know that answer. Sorry about that. I see Winnie's hand raised. Winnie?
Yeah, she does training as well for immigration.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great.
So
Thanks,
you're familiar
Winnie.
with her then? Awesome.
What did you say?
I said, so you're familiar with her?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with her.
Great. Yeah, so she's going to be doing that training for us. Something I know I'm really excited about. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so I'm just going to flip us back over to our agenda. The next piece on here was looking at those key areas of focus. So just to kind of review what the goal is with those, we're looking at hiring and the hiring of police officers, and the goal for us, like what's our role, right? The police advisory board, what's our role in that? So we're responsible for having one person off the police advisory board to attend the oral portion of the hiring process for St. Albans Police Department, and to assist in identifying an additional group member to sit on the hiring oral boards as they come up in the future. So that's a total of 2 members. In addition, we will offer ideas and suggestions as to hiring, recruitment, and retention in this profession that is decreasing in numbers at the rate of 25% every 10 years. And that was estimated in 2018. So with that, Winnie and Tom and I had connected to try to strategize, talk more. And I think the biggest piece, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can pull up another document here. But I think that a big piece that we have is, because we're so new and we're still learning the ropes, is getting a few questions that came to us about, as far as process and what that looks like. And I thank you, Chief, for being on this Zoom meeting so we can ask you those questions. I had written them down, so I want to pull the document, but I do remember off the top of my head one of them. And so one of the questions was, what does it look what does it look like as far as the timing and the steps with policy in receiving an application versus setting up an interviews versus a polygraph versus a background? Like, can you give us a little idea about the process so we can better understand that?
Yep. So the process is lengthy. The typical process takes anywhere from 2 to 4 months to get through. And if you fail any one part of the process, then you're done. So the process is set up where an organization, whether it's us or a federal organization, it's all basically the same. But for us, I'll speak specifically to us, where VSP is the same. But you put out a ad, local or Vermont wide or nationwide, whatever you want to do, that you're looking to hire an officer. People apply. You take their application, and then the very first step is you run a regular a record check, just see if they've been arrested. If they haven't been arrested, nothing glaring there, then your first step they'll do is the oral board. When they come in for the oral board, they'll fill an application, a more in-depth application. They'll have some basic questionnaire, but it's very basic. And then they'll sit in for the oral board. And that typically weeds out a handful of them with the panel. This panel makeup that Winnie was a part of was only the second time we've used this makeup. We had used it once before last summer. Prior to that, oral boards were made up of just internal employees. And now the idea is to bring in members of the public and now members of the Police Advisory Board. But if they get by the oral board, and then they become more in the process, they made it through the first step, and then they immediately go into the screening and the prep for the polygraph. And they're set up with a polygraph. That's done. There's only a couple of agencies in the state of Vermont that will do polygraphs for you. You schedule them out. That takes a couple of weeks to get scheduled. They meet with a polygrapher. That usually knocks out, I knew the stats better when I was for the state police, because I used to sit on these hiring panels all the time. That knocks out more than 50% of the candidates. So they go through the polygraph process. If they happen to pass the polygraph process, then they go into the background stage. The background stage takes anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months, depending on who's doing the background investigation. We hire our background investigations out now to a company that does them for us. They're very expensive. They're very in-depth. If they happen to get through the background investigation, then they've got to pass the entrance exam for the academy, which unfortunately knocks out another group of people, because there's a written exam, a physical exam, and a mental health exam. So those are the steps. So it's a rather lengthy process. And if any one of those steps, they fail any one of those steps, they're done. So unfortunately, like, this is new for me. We only hired one person last summer, and now we're in another group. When I was at state police and we were hiring all the time, we would have people fail at the beginning. Then we'd have people literally fail the day the academy started. You go 6 months thinking they were hired, and they'd fail the PT test, because that's the last step, the day of the academy. If you fail that step, you made it through everything else. The company has spent $10,000 getting you to this point. If you fail that PT test, you're turned away.
Thank you. Before I jump ahead, I just wanted to know, I apologize, Chris, I didn't see the chat earlier when I had to do the share screen, but I noticed that you put relative to Nikki Fuller and her trainings that she's also going to be doing a training with CBOEO staff April 30th. So thank you for putting that comment, and I apologize. And moving forward, if I'm sharing screen and anybody has anything, please don't hesitate to unmute. Winnie, I see your hand up.
Chief, something that I was alarmed at, that the 5 of the applicants that was at that interview that day said that it was easiest to get into Vermont police or police, PD, or corrections.
I'm sorry, it's easiest to get into the police, the Vermont police?
Yes, to become
yes.
Excuse me?
Yes, that is true, because the waiting list to get into the bordering states like Mass and New York are 2 or 3 years long because of the sheer numbers. Most of our applicants in Vermont come from out of state.
And because they couldn't get in and out of states is why they are coming here.
The waiting list is much longer, correct. Their list, like New York, will have a waiting list of 10,000 people waiting to get into their academy.
Does that waiting list have anything to do with the parameters that you just said, or just
No,
even
it's the
just to
same
begin
test.
the process?
Yeah, because we do the testing. Well, I say we, I no longer do. Vermont State Police does the testing for Pennsylvania, helps them out. It's the same exact parameters. It's just the sheer numbers of people that apply. If you are a New York resident and you want New York resident, you want to work in New York State Police, you're going to wait a long time. They only put through a handful of people a year, just like we do, and that list grows and grows and grows. And Mass is the same way. If you go to a smaller state like New Hampshire, you'll get in like you do in Vermont, likely quicker, but they only put through, same as us, 1 to 2 classes a year, and the sheer numbers of applicants hold you back. But the parameters or the requirements are exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is Pennsylvania State Police doesn't require a polygraph anymore, which will come back and bite them eventually. I think Rhode Island or one of the other states has done away with, I could be wrong. There is another state that has reduced or done away with their PT standards, but most of the states are the same. When you get into some of the states, I can't speak about municipalities because they're all different. I can just speak about our state, because our state, the municipalities and the state police are exactly the same.
Well, one applicant said that he had applied for New Hampshire. He went through the preliminary interview, and he was his process was finished.
Absolutely.
And he applied to Vermont, and he said he was actually surprised that he got up to an interview because he didn't get that far in New Hampshire. So I think that Vermont, because we are trying to go in a different direction, that we should really come up with a more like New York. I am glad to get into New York at this point, because your credit, what New York has added, and I could tell you this because my grandson just went through it, and he came through John Jay College law school, and his credit is the one that gave him an edge. If he didn't have good credit, because he's young, he's only 19, his mom and dad was paying his bills, so he has good credit. So, but what I'm saying is that I found it very peculiar that each applicant was saying, well, I applied here or I applied there. And when I came to Vermont, I'm surprised, it's like, wow, I'm here for an interview. It was like a kid in a candy store. It was so easy for them.
Yeah, you will get a lot of that. You'll have multiple applicants that have applied multiple places. That is very common, very common. And the people that you saw that day, there were at least 3 that had applications in number of places. We were just one of a number. We're all fighting for the same people.
Chief, is the process different if someone is already a law enforcement officer in the state? Do they go through that same process to work at SAPD, or is it slightly different?
The only thing that's different is a polygraph is more in depth, the background is more in depth, and they do not have to go through the academy if they're from within the state of Vermont. If they're from outside the state of Vermont, they still have to go through the whole full-time academy.
Thank you. I have one question too that have come up. Do you guys typically look to hire from within or recruit from within? Is that part of a practice?
Yeah, ideally, you would always, well, recruit from within isn't really a thing, right? But promote from within would be ideal.
That was, sorry,
Yeah.
that was the wrong word.
Yes, promote from within would be ideal, but as with any other job, when the positions are contract positions, which ours are, which means that, speaking of what we have right now, we have an open sergeant slot. Whoever puts in for that knows they are having to work night shift, and it could be for a long time. It could be for years, given that's based on seniority. You don't have a lot of people that want to go to straight nights for a long time, and that unfortunately decreases the pool of people that are willing to put in for that, knowing that they're going to be stuck on nights. And that's a contract thing. It's not a department issue as much as it's the contract. It's a union issue.
So it's safe to say that the reason why only one person applied for the sergeant position was because it's going to be a night position?
That's why none of our internal people put in. That is correct.
And no other person from no other law enforcement agency put in for that position because it's a night position?
No, I can't speak to that. I can speak internally. That's why none of our internal people did. Why other people from other parts of the state, I have no idea why they didn't put in.
every day. So it's
Okay.
our job and what we're trying to come up.
Thank you. And I think the only other thing that we had, when Tom and I and Winnie were talking, we're curious about, is there any action taken prior to, like, let's say that you guys get the application, is there any kind of process like Googling the person's name or Facebooking? And there's a part of me that knows to some degree that could be considered not best practice or possibly not within the legal guidance, but I'm just curious about what that looks like as far as with law enforcement.
I don't put a lot of work into that because that's what the background check's going to do. If they get through the initial interview and then they get into the polygraph's going to catch most everything, and then the background's going to catch all of that, because that's a majority of the background is their past work history, especially if they're a prior employee, and then their social media. And that's where, because that's where everybody lives, on social media, unfortunately. So they're going to, anything that has been put into social media is going to be caught. Anything that's out there for them, as far as Googling their name, is going to be caught. And it's going to be caught much more in depth than anything we're going to do in 2 seconds Googling their name. So I rely on them to do that rather than us coming to a judgment based on what we see. That's what we pay them for, and that's what they're going to find. And we get very in depth. I report on this the only officer we've hired since we hired this company was, in a binder, and there's 60 pages of background in there. They do a great job.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that helps, because I think, just learning, since we're all fairly new to the board too, just learning what that process is and looks like is going to help us moving forward. Chris, I see your hand up.
I apologize. I'm doing this on my phone and everything's so tiny. I don't have my computer, so I'm a little lost here on my phone. But anyway, so I'm just wondering how many positions St. Albans PD normally has available?
Well, it's a good question because it's changed since I've gotten here, since we last town contract. So right now, we'd like to get to 12 uniform officers. Then we have the special units, which is the school resource officers and the detective and the command positions. And we're down a sergeant position right now. So we'd like to hire 2 uniform officers to get us up to par, and then 1 sergeant's position. That's what we're lacking right now. We have 1 officer that's been deployed for 444 days is his deployment time frame. He's been gone for about a month and a half now. We're going to try to run without him and just cover it with the people we currently have. The issue everybody in the state of Vermont has is due to COVID, instead of running 2 academy classes a year, we're running 1. So from the time somebody gets in the academy, which right now we have our new officer starting in 2 weeks in the academy, when he starts in 2 weeks, he won't be on his own to run a car on his own for about a year. The next class is in February. So if we put somebody in that class in February, which is 10 months away, he won't be on his own to a year from September. So you're looking at a year and a half before we get somebody else spun up. So to catch up on those 2 positions of officers, you're looking at the minimum a year and a half. And that's if we get slots in the academy, which you're lucky if you get 1 slot, nevertheless 2, because every agency in the state of Vermont is trying to get people in, and they only allow 36 people in that class and that's got for every department in the state of Vermont. So we're in a bad spot right now for getting people through.
Did that number go down because you no longer have the St. Albans town contract?
It did, yes. Yep. We didn't have to get rid of anybody. It went down through attrition and people, such. So we didn't have to, luckily, good and bad, right? We didn't have to let anybody go, but we got down to a number. Then we went below that. So now we're trying to play catch up. And again, because of COVID and the reduction in class time and even the classes the academy is having, they've reduced the number because you can only have 1 person per room because of COVID restrictions. And it's just, I don't know if there's an agency in Vermont that's full up. And so everybody's begging to get people down there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Jamie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and I'm sure we probably have to move on from this. I'm being a terrible helper with the time tonight, but I think my only other question, just given some of the media headlines that have hit this week, obviously, there's always concern. But the bigger question is, I know you've done a ton of work around internal affairs and complaints and that kind of work. Does something like that on an existing officer pop up on a background check, or is it sequestered?
No, so what's happened, this was one of the better things that state did. In July of 2018, they started Act 56, which was automatically, which required that anything that an officer did that was criminal or against policy got reported to the academy. So that was the first step. And then in October of last year, they took it to the final step, which was, and you have to forgive me for getting the act, but it's like Act 166 or something like that, which required that an officer wanted to leave an agency and go to another agency, they had to fill out a form. So for me to look at this officer that Winnie's speaking of that put in for another spot, for him to come to us, he had to fill out a waiver. If he refused to fill out a waiver, he can't even apply anywhere else. So for him to come to us, he had to fill out a waiver. By him filling that out, that gave us complete access to every record he has at his current employer. And that's everything, internal, and valuations, everything. So there's no way for an officer within the state of Vermont to go to another job without everything being disclosed. And like I said, the officer says, no, I'm not giving that to you, the hiring agency can't even look at him. And the person on the hook for that would be me. It's department head, the hiring agency can lose their certification for not getting that waiver signed. And that's even out of retirement. It's out of, if somebody left for 2 years and took a job somewhere else and said, you know what, I want to go back to being a police officer, it stays with you for life. So if you've ever been a certified law officer, you have to fill that out. So it's a really good system now. I think they've covered the loopholes that were there for years.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think at this juncture, I'm just going to take us to the next item of focus. Let me just do my share screen here again. So the next one that we're talking about and looking at is the community partnership focus. And with that one, again, the brief overview is that we will concentrate on suggesting beneficial community resources that might be willing to work with the police department and determine the conduit for this to occur. We will need to assist in facilitating some of these connections at the onset to foster the process. We will keep in mind that as much as we all want it and would benefit from it, there can't be an embedded person at the PD from every resource. So we need to look at how we can get a resource to answer the phones at 3 a.m. and respond, and it's a major undertaking. So we had our Franklin Grand Isle Community Partnership meeting. It's a monthly meeting. And just to give a brief overview of what the community partnership is for anybody who's not super familiar with it. So the community partnership used to be a statewide funded funded initiative. And in 2008, the funding was disbanded, and Franklin Grand Isle County was the only, I'm not gonna say is the only now, because some areas of the state, I believe there's at least one other area of the state that has started meeting again as a partnership. But Franklin and Grand Isle County was the only one that continued meeting since the funding was gone in 2018. And we have a very robust meeting every month, great presentations, very diverse group of providers, everything from nonprofits to business owners to medical, addiction, recovery. So there's a lot of different attendance that takes place there. And this past month, I was super grateful that Winnie and Chris were both able to attend that. I know I've seen Chris attend it in the past. Seeing Winnie attend it, she was very warmly welcomed, had a lot of fans there. And we had a presentation by Jess Graff at Community Action talking about homelessness in Vermont related to COVID. So I bring that up to first say that anyone else who is interested in trying to learn more about what the providers and services are that we have in Franklin and Grand Isle County, that and also people who do go to those meetings would be some of the best partners to team up with law enforcement and assist, because we want to look at gaps and how can we create bridges between the services? How can we have the appropriate service responding? And the best example we have, which is a fantastic example, is the fact that there are embedded crisis workers in the police department right now. And that's been happening for some years now. I think almost 7 years, 6-7 years.
Yeah, I would say Nick is probably rolling in on at least, 2015, so 6, I would say.
Yeah, and it's so powerful.
Sam's position was before that, so.
Right. And that's been a great partnership. And I mean, Nick and I just spoke less than a week ago. So I think that that's a great starting point for our board to get familiar with who are the community partners out there, who are the organizations, what are the services that they provide. And then I also wanted to touch on, I'm on the executive lead team for the community partnership. I serve on the executive lead team with Joe Halco and Kristen Pryor, John Gorton, Mary Pickner, and we had our monthly meeting to look at the schedule moving forward. We have a presenter already for May, and then June is our legislative meeting. We have the legislators come in June and also in December, but we're looking at the fall. So I just wanted to throw it out to our board tonight to give you a heads up that the goal is for our board to present at a community partnership meeting in the fall. We haven't identified the exact month yet because we have a few organizations that we're awaiting responses on, but I'll keep this team posted each month and also by email as we learn more. That would be a meeting where we could all, attend and talk about the work that we're doing, and more than anything, to connect with those providers and solicit ideas. So when we look at the brief summary that I read right before talking about community partnership and how is it that we can access the appropriate resources more often, I believe we've already got some ideas of which organizations or resources could be helpful, but I think that we'll also learn more in the coming months of who else could we bring to the table. And I think that at that community partnership meeting, it would be really helpful for the providers in the area to know that, first off, that there even is a police advisory board, because some obviously don't really know yet. And then also, what is the board doing? What is the goal? And having the opportunity to share that we want our board members to have as much knowledge as possible of the services available out there that could be beneficial with partnering with law enforcement, just as NCSS has done, and just as I previously did with Northwestern Medical Center, and now with Phoenix House. How can we get some more providers to be in that partnership so we can better serve our community? So that's kind of the overview of the community partnership, but I want to open up the floor to any other board members who have thoughts, ideas, questions. Winnie and Chris, if you have any thoughts as of the last meeting, anything that you want to talk about tonight? No? Okay. So I will go on to the next agenda item and happily turn it over to Jamie here. So the next one we had was let me just move my screens around. Looking at the topic of policy and procedure. And this is something that Jamie's been taking the lead on. So I am going to let you take the floor, Jamie, and just tell me when you want me to pull up a policy and a procedure, the policies that we're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Melinda. So I had the opportunity to touch base with Chris and with John and with Chief around a policy that actually went to City Council last night as kind of our first sort of test of how we want this to flow. And Melinda, I think you can bring that up anytime, but I'll still kind of give an overview of the idea. And this will help us as a larger group too, as these policies flow to us for review and feedback to, know kind of what our guardrails are. So policy and procedure is something that I really enjoy, which I know puts me in such a strange category of human, but it is something that I enjoy. I like writing them. I like reviewing them. And also recognize that they play such a huge role in the success of any organization, but particularly when you are on the front lines and it's in a first responder type role or in a public eye, that having these policies and procedures in place that your expectation is that your entire workforce adhere to is what sets you up for success long term. So the idea was that we'll do a deep dive on these policies in advance of them coming to the larger group, just to be able to really spend the amount of time that as we move towards an hour-long meeting, we might not be able to do on every policy, and hopefully give some good and meaningful feedback to Chief and to his team on what we might recommend to see there, what we believe the committee would like to see there, what we think needs to be there as it aligns with our 21st century policing roadmap. So the real trick though here is that, and I think Melinda has it in the agenda, we talk about CALEA, which without the agenda, I don't really know what it stands for, but it is some, very specific components that Chief needs to adhere to when he writes these policies, but there are also higher laws that police need to adhere to. And we just have to be mindful that our role is to sort of make sure that we're hitting those transparency components, the accountability components, not so much in the process, but rather how the policy is worded so that it is transparent to a layperson or to the community, and that if someone has a question, we would be able to show them this policy, or SAPD would be able to present this policy to someone, and that it's clear that there's accountability. And if there's a belief that something's not accountable, they would be able to question that, but making sure that that language is clear there. So this policy is the duty to intervene, which did go last night or did not go last night to city, or Monday night to city council.
It did. It's been
It
approved.
did.
It got adopted Tuesday.
So, this was one where, part of the conversation around this was just, just a recommendation that some things that were in the policy, but we found on lower pages really were upfront in this policy. It also allowed us to ask some very real questions of Chief, and just what the goal of it was for him to talk through the process, ask some tough questions that might be asked at this committee level, and just make sure that we're keeping our conversation focused on the things that are within our scope, which is to really advise Chief and advise the city manager on policies and procedures to make sure that they're aligning with that roadmap that we're all following. So Chief, I don't know if you want to take this opportunity to review this policy with the group.
It's up to you guys. I will say, I can say this, so that a ton of work goes into these policies, but we miss stuff. And the board is on this, in this instance, I think will be going forward, very helpful in pointing out how these flow better and where we do miss stuff, and make it more obvious where it should be put in the policy. These are well written and for CLIA standard, but they're not as well written for the, as you termed, the lay person to read them and understand them and point out stuff. So it's a very beneficial cooperation we have in writing these and reviewing them before we go to the state council. And my experience with the state council prior to this board and prior to the team that's looking at these policies is I didn't have to explain very much of this policy for them to approve it on Monday night, where prior to you existing, I was explaining these policies, and it's hard for them to review them when they don't have a lot of time. This was a much better system because you actually had the time to review them prior to us even meeting, and then we reviewed them together, and your suggestions were much easier to take when I had time to explain it and we had back and forth. So anyway, very good process we have right now. So real brief, this policy was designed to put in place procedures and expectations of officers to just do what it says, intervene if they see something happening that should not be happening. It is a way for them to safely, and when I say safely, it protects them when they intervene procedurally and internally. Gives them the knowledge and the power to intervene against a fellow officer, even if that's a superior, to stand up and do the right thing if they see somebody that's not acting ethically or morally or legally when dealing with a person, and again, this mandates that they do such as well. And then, as importantly as them stepping up and doing it, it gives them it mandates that they report it and gives them a timeline to report it and how to report it. And that's pretty much what this policy covers. And it's only 3 pages. It's very cut and dry.
And I will just point out that we're moving towards, and I think as we get our meetings, which I know we'll talk about later tonight, into the right time frame, these will ideally come to this whole committee before they go to city council. I know Chief just had a couple that the absence of them created, some very real safety concerns that needed to be addressed. So it made sense that they went to city council before they came to this group, but we'll work to get this on a timeline where this whole group has had a chance to look at and review these before they go to city council. So I did just want to point that out, that this was kind of an unusual situation this week, but we'll work harder to make sure that these are on a right timeline as we move forward.
Agreed. This one, we felt that this needed to be put in place. I'm not, I'm not thinking that there's anybody that needed to intervene or we're missing anything, but I think that it's a disservice to the department and your officers if you don't have a policy in place that addresses that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for highlighting that too, Jamie. I know that we've been emailing, looking at how to schedule board meetings moving forward, when the best timing would be. And in the emails, we've highlighted the 4th or the 1st week of the month would be most beneficial. So that's something that we've learned along the way. Do you want me to pull up the other policy now?
Yeah, I think so, just because that one is equally as important. But did anybody have any questions from the board on that one or concerns? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll get the next policy, which was the response to resistance. And feel free to kind of guide me or tell me if you'd like me to scroll up or down as you're going over this one. Can you see the policy itself now on the screen?
Yes.
Great.
Go ahead, Chief.
Okay, so this one's a little more in depth. It's 17 pages. So I think the good thing for everybody to understand on this one is a couple things. One, the response to resistance or use of force, whichever you want to term it, is based on the state mandated dashboard or ladder, whichever you want to call it. They've changed the name numerous times over my career, but currently it's called the dashboard. That's put out by Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council, who certifies and regulates all state police officers, certified state police officers in the state of Vermont. It doesn't matter what agency you work for. We're all trained and certified under the same academy, which we're one of the only states, if not the only state in the country that does it like that, which is a good thing. So we can all say we go through the same standard. So they put out this dashboard. This dashboard is what gave us our definitions that you're going to read through here. And they're the ones that kind of tell you very clearly what force you can use based on what the person you're dealing with is doing, based on their definitions, meaning passive resistance, active aggression. They define those. We didn't come up with these definitions. And it tells you based on if they're being passive resistant, what you can use for force or to counter that resistance. So this is pretty written in to match that. It just isn't a policy form. This policy also may become a moot point here very soon. The Criminal Justice Training Council has been talking about coming out with a statewide policy for response to resistance or use of force, whatever they term it as. They've been talking about this for about a year and a half, maybe a little longer than that. I just was, quite honestly, I was getting a little tired of waiting for that to come out because I wanted to get a policy out that addressed chokeholds. Our old one did not. So that I wanted to get one out that addressed that. So I looked at what the state has. The state keeps putting out drafts saying this is what might be coming, this is what might be coming, and people are tweaking it. So I took the latest and we wrote this. And I do believe that the state comes out with one, it's going to be I don't think you're going to see much different than this. If they do come out with a different, or the state one that says that it's mandated, this is what you will use, then I'll get it to the board to review it. But if they tell us that's what we're going to use, then that's what we're going to have to use. But I will let you see it to let you know. But until then, this is as close as I could find. That's based on other agencies in the state of Vermont, what we had prior to this, the CLIA standard one that I was able to obtain, and intertwining the definitions and such based on the state dashboard that they currently released, which was released about a year ago now. So I think it's a very good policy. It's very in-depth. Not a lot of wiggle room in there. Not a lot of gray area. That's what's changed with use of force policies in my 22-year career now. They took out most of the gray area. Not saying it's good or bad. I just think that the policies have gotten very tight now. So this was run through the PAB policy team. I thought we had some great discussions. They highlighted some things that I not necessarily reworded, but moved the wording around, and I thought it was great. Great feedback, and I think we were pleased with it. And it was adopted yesterday, so I appreciate the help.
And I think if you want to scroll back up for just a second, Melinda, I know one of the things, because this is a very long policy, right? And it needs to be, but we sort of got, I think all three of us, Chris and chime in too, kind of had the question of, well, what happens when, what's the expectation when you do it, and recognizing that was something that, I would want to be reassured as a member of the public that there is an expectation that this is reported in a timely manner, and that it's clear in this policy, and that if you don't follow this policy, it's whatever that process is for PD, when someone doesn't follow policy, is adhered to. And so that was one of the suggestions, because I think that timing is a little bit further down and it's very detailed and important. And we didn't want to change anything about that, but just that you could read it in this first paragraph and know not only does this hold the officer accountable to what the definitions of all of this are, but also to, how and when they report.
Yeah, I guess one other thing I should throw in there for those of you on this board that aren't on the policy team is that there's another there's another form that's as important as this policy. When somebody has a use of force or response to resistance incident, when they hand in their report within 24 hours, they have to fill out I don't have it open, but it's very lengthy. Actually, I may have it open. I don't have it open. It's like a 7-page fill in the blank checkbox report of what happened along with their narrative. But their checkbox details everything that occurred. It describes the description of where they were, what they were driving, what they were wearing, so how they were identified as a police officer. And it describes what the force was. It's all checked. I don't think there's anything that's gonna be missed there either. So by the time they write their narrative and we have that form, we should have a very clear picture of what occurred. So that also goes hand in hand with this. It's just not a policy. It's a supplemental form to help us identify and make sure nothing's being excluded. Because when people write in narrative form, sometimes they're very general, and that checkbox form, they have to fill out every single section of it. So it should help us fill in all the blanks in our mind so we know what happened.
Chris, did you have anything to add to the process from our policy review perspective? Any thoughts to share with the group?
No, I don't really have anything to add. Chief was very good at answering all our questions, any concerns that we had. Just, I think we just made some minor, suggestions and changed some language and that sort of thing. So I think, and as Jamie said to us, we'll, in the future, we'll get these policies a little bit sooner. So we have a little bit more time to go through them. It was kind of a quick process this time, and I understand that they had to get approved right away. So, but no, I thought, the process went well.
Well, like I said, in the future too, I don't expect to be pushing for a quick turnaround like this. This one was really bothering me because I felt we were leaving. I hate to think that any of this would happen, but when you're running without a policy and stuff that is happening other places in the world, why are you waiting? So from here on out, the rest of the policies I don't feel are time sensitive like this one was.
Given that, Chief, your last comment right there, knowing what is happening, when lethal force is utilized, that's a little bit of a different process. Can you just clue folks into what that looks like if that does happen?
So the one thing that's different about lethal force is we don't investigate our own lethal force. The only agency in the state of Vermont that investigates lethal force is the Vermont State Police with a major crime unit. So that will be a different, it still falls under the same policy as far as reporting, but we all know that that's going to be reported by everybody and their brother in the first 5 minutes. So, but from that point on, that investigation, the state police will be asked to come in and handle that investigation.
And does the officer continue to work while that investigation is happening? No. Or okay.
Nope, they are put on administrative leave until that investigation is done, and that's not only for the investigation purposes, but it's also for the mental health purposes of the officer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I want to thank you too for taking the initiative to prioritize getting these policies in place.
No, it may sound that way, but it's still been a long process.
Yeah. Okay.
Did anyone else from the group have any thoughts on this one? It's big and it is important.
And it's also, I'm going to be in my follow-up email that I send after the board meetings, I'm going to include the copy of these 2 policies.
It's good to know too that note that these are both annual evals, annual reviews of these. So we can obviously review them if the state comes out with something they need in there, we'll add them in there, but these will be reviewed annually too. So they'll be pulled out and checked for, and that when I do that, I might anticipate, unless you tell me differently, to run the annual reviews by you as well, to see what you might find.
Great.
So much. Okay. Was there anything else on the policies, Jamie, that you wanted to touch on, Jamie or Chris, before we go to the next focus area?
Not from me.
Not for me. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
so in pulling up the agenda again, that has the summary. The next one is the data.
Yeah, so the data one, you know, we did a lot of work as a whole team not that long ago, and we'll come back together again. But one of our big initiatives will be to get out the survey to the public. So I think we shared last time that we. Oh, let me back up. I got ahead of myself. I was very excited. So the data team, much like the policy team, is also going to, you know, come together and really all of that work that Danielle really pulled together for us before, and just do some deeper dives on that and figure out exactly what we want to request from Chief, what the context is, where we want to get other data sources from, you know, to make sure that we're not necessarily having one-sided data, and then really review at it and come to this group with a presentation and look for feedback, questions and answers. And so much the same as we talked about in the policies is really just making sure that we're using this time effectively and making sure that we're having, you know, those opportunities to really dig in, figure out where our opportunities are, and then pull it forward for bigger discussion at this group. So Danielle, and we haven't come together yet as a team, so I'm totally blanking on who the other member is. My brain just panicked. Melinda?
So for data, I believe, Chris, was that?
No,
that you?
it's not
Or no,
Chris.
It was John.
No, it's not
John,
me.
it's John.
Yeah, it was
It's
John.
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 John, thank you. Okay, so John and Danielle for that. So once we get this survey out of SurveyMonkey, and we've I've been able to establish that the best way for us to probably do that will be to send the link. To send emails to people is a little bit more challenging and comes at a cost and is a little more difficult to manage. But we can do where we push it out through social media, and we have a link that we can share with people via email. So we'll take that survey that, you know, I did when I was the human popsicle, and and really put it into the SurveyMonkey format. And then I'll send it to this group and just ask that all of you push it out through whatever your social media venues are, to your contacts via email, whatever works for you. But the big thing that we'll ask for in that space is just, you know, we kept the questions short and simple because we wanted some real aggregate data, and we wanted it to be consistent over time. But there's absolutely opportunity for people to write open comment, and we want to encourage people to do that because, you know, you can capture all of this data and formulate it in a way, but sometimes that commentary section is where you can find, you know, some really unique trends that you might not have been able to capture in the questions. It's also where you can find some important stories that you want to pull forward about what people's experiences are, both good and bad. I mean, you want people to be open and safe to do both. And it also helps put some of their answers in context, in terms of, you know, why they might have answered, yes, I am comfortable, you know, calling SAPD. For instance, in the one commentary, the one survey that I captured in person, they answered yes, they would feel safe and comfortable. They trust them. But then they had like this little aggregate of unless they're driving down my street, and then they drive too fast. And that also goes for fire department and ambulances too. So if you could just give them all that feedback, that'd be great. So that's the kind of information that you can catch from the commentary. That's hard to get into data, but it's important to put the data in a space. So that will hopefully be done in a couple of days, and I'll send it out to this group, and then we can launch it globally. And, you know, just encourage your friends and family and other contacts that you have to answer honestly, and, you know, give us a real picture from the community. And then we'll have the community information, we'll have the data that we have from Chief, we'll have all of the great work that Danielle has put together for, you know, for using data for that accountability work. And then once we pull all that together, we'll be able to come forward to this group with some, you know, meaningful thoughts and plans around what dials we want to move, and how we can recommend to Chief and the city how they can improve improve public perception or improve their data over time, whatever the case may be.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Are there any other comments or thoughts or questions from the rest of the board on data or even on any of those 4 key areas of focus? Any last thoughts or ideas on those? Okay. So that actually brings us to the point in our agenda to open the floor for public comment. We are actually 15 minutes early, arriving at that time. So I do want to open the floor right now to public if there's any comment. Definitely feel free to use, there we go, Zach's hand is up. Yes, Zach.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me okay?
We can. I would say go ahead and talk a little louder if possible, but.
All right, I'll give it my best shot.
Here we go.
I had some camera issues. So I just first want to thank you all for doing this work. It's really, really good to hear. And it's good to hear from you all about the process. I think being a policy and data wonk is super cool, Jamie. So just want to throw that out there. I shared some policies that I discovered from the Bennington Police Department, and I sent that to the PAB email. And if it comes in handy in future, I know there's probably a wait list or a priority list of things to tackle first, but there are just a couple of policies in there that I thought were important and wanted to share. And I'll just go through those really quickly. One is a policy for responding to persons experiencing a mental health crisis. I'm not sure if that's already on the books, but it seemed important to me. Next, I saw that they had released, and these were approved by the select board last fall, I should add, and they're open for public comment in the town of Bennington now. They had a specific policy on investigating and reporting hate crimes, which I thought was particularly important. I've just seen too much white supremacist, neo-Nazi activity in this town and city to not say something about it. It was important to me, and I just wanted to put it forth to the board to at least add to the deck in terms of review for action later. Lastly, there was a specific policy on domestic violence investigations. I'm sure that may be on the books already. And I have one last one. It's just the use of conducted electrical weapons like tasers. Felt that was important. Jamie said earlier, it's great to have policies on the books, so we all know what the process is dealing with this, what officers are working with, and what they know they can and can't do. So again, just empowering work on either side. That was all I really had for comment right now. And I just again want to reiterate that I really appreciate all of the hard work each of you are doing in your own way, with your own perspectives, with your own expertise and knowledge. I just really want to thank you for that. That is all.
Thank you so much, Zach. It's always such a pleasure to see you in attendance at a number of meetings and your participation. And I do appreciate the email that you had sent to the Police Advisory Board. I did forward that out to everyone. I'm happy to do so again, and also encourage you to keep on sending your thoughts and ideas. You have been just an amazing member of the community. And I'll second what you said as far as Jamie is, in my opinion, like our rock star for loving the policies and procedures and data. I am so grateful she is, that's one of her favorite things to spend time on, because she's awesome at it. Do any of our board members have any thoughts or comments relative to what Zach said? I
just wanted to let Zach know that the mental health policy is in queue. So, Chief has done some work on that. Thank you, and thank you for, I guess there are worse things to be recognized for than being a policy nerd. So I'll take it. So thank you.
And I just wanted to say there are some domestic violence policies also at City PD. So I don't know if they're in the queue, but I know that over the years, we have been part of, addressing those. My program has.
Thank you, Chris. I was actually going to ask that.
That's great to know, Chris and Jamie. Thank you so much. I feel like I was had some follow up with one of those questions. I guess just generally hearing about the hiring process, it's very interesting to hear about what the administrative process is and the different gates that candidates go through when hiring a police officer. I don't know if y'all listened to the podcast snippet I sent around the mayor from Ithaca, New York, but it was just really interesting to me, and hearing the chief talk about the hiring process versus kind of this vision for in towns or in cities that this mayor's exploring, and just how the need is for public safety, and how wonderful, I hope, a more diverse response and spectrum to public safety needs could really lead to some alleviation of these blocks and maybe, well, in the process of hiring an officer. So that's just a little aspirational. It's a great listen. If you haven't listened to it already, it's really helpful, and at least something that is encouraging and inspiring and positive for both officers and members of the public. So yeah, I can't recommend that enough. And I believe that was emailed around before. Just had to throw in a plug once more.
Thank you so much, Zach. Yeah, and I am going to redistribute, well as Winnie had mentioned Pine Lake in a recent email, and I ended up finding the link to that documentary. I can't remember, it might have even been you, Jamie, who said, oh, I don't know if I'm finding the right link for it. And I did, I started watching it, and it is, that woman is amazing. It's fantastic so far. So I'll include that as well. In the next email that I send out. Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. And I haven't even finished it. I'm only probably an hour into it. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, I had found a news story on that area, but it wasn't the documentary. And the news story was only maybe, a 10-minute blurb in, I don't know, CBS This Morning or something, but it was, enough of a hook. And then I just couldn't find the documentary from there. So I'm grateful that you were able to find.
Yeah, full disclosure, it's interesting because the video itself shows that it's a 5-second video, but I clicked on it anyway. And all of a sudden when you open it, it's like almost 2 hours. So it was confusing the way it looks at the bottom, but it is in fact the right one. So when you see it too, if you see like, why is Melinda setting me 5 minutes? It's actually longer than that when you actually click on it. And I do want to thank Chief so much for attending this meeting and being available for questions and whatnot. And I know you have another commitment coming up, so I don't want to hold you. We have reached the final agenda item with public comment. I just want to open the floor to the board members if there's any other items that you'd like to touch base on and give time for that. And if not, then I would be happy to open the floor for a motion to adjourn.
I will make the motion.
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second? Is that a second, Winnie?
Yeah.
A second by Winnie. Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thumbs up. Any opposed? Okay, thank you all again so much for attending, for your work, your participation. I'll send a follow-up email out with those resources, as well as re-forward out the one from Zach and a few others that have come in, and we will discuss the next board meeting that hasn't been determined yet. We're waiting for some doodle poll answers. I love that word, doodle poll. Once we get those responses, then we will make sure that everybody's notified, the public, board members, and everybody on the next board meeting is. That will be 1 hour as opposed to an hour and a half. So thank you all. Have a beautiful rest of the evening.
Thank
It's still
you.
light
Thank
out.
you.